wasallam was here today, watching all the brothers and sisters divided on the sunnah he gave. He be screaming out to the ummah of this world, saying you're to blame.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Contemporary Islamic Issues on Huda TV. I'm your host, Arqum Rashid. On today's episode, we will be speaking about the westernization of Muslims. And what is this concept of westernization? Why is it so common amongst Muslims? And we're going to specifically speak about westernization amongst our religious principles. So I want to start off by welcoming and introducing my guest for today, Sheikh Assim Al Hakeem. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hayyakum Allah.
Sheikh Assim, let's start off by defining westernization so we're all on the same page here with the viewers.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa alihi wa sahbihi man ihtada bihudahu, amma ba'd. Westernization is a state of mind where the Muslims tend to mimic or copy the Western style of thinking, of living, and in some cases even in practicing their religion. So it is what some people call as putting them in a melting pot. So they would be transformed into something else rather than abiding by their religion and culture.
Okay, so I want to, inshallah, throughout this program, just to give an overcap of what we're going to do, I want to go through the reasons for westernization. I want to go through the effects that it has on Muslims, and I want to, like we said, specifically deal with westernization in religious principles. So let's start off by the reasons. What would you say are some of the reasons why Muslims would want to be like the West, whether in Muslim countries or whether Muslim citizens living in the West, raised in the West, in terms of, obviously, for example, in terms of what they wear, that changes, culturally, and there's many things that change depending on their culture. But in terms of religious practices, why would you say they want to be like the West?
Basically speaking, the Prophet ﷺ warned us when he said, لَتَتَّبِعَنَّ سَنَنَ الَّذِينَ قَبْلَكُمْ, that you will follow the footsteps of those before you. And to even the smallest details, that it is a handspan or an arm span, even to the extent that if they were to enter a lizard's hole, you would follow them. So the Prophet is warning us of something that would happen in the future, where people would mimic, would copy, would imitate the people before them to that extent. So the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, are you referring to the Jews and the Christians? Are you saying that we will follow their footsteps? And the Prophet said, yes, alayhi salatu wasalam. So this means that the greatest reason for following the footsteps of, or falling into the trap of westernization is stemmed from this hadith. Shaitan is there, is the driving force behind it. Also there is the lack of knowledge. So the less knowledge a person has, the more influenced he is. Thirdly, there is the inferiority complex, because it is human nature that people tend to look to those who are stronger, to those who are more influential, to those who are richer. You know Qarun, as mentioned in Surah Al-Qasas at the end, who was, some say, the cousin of Prophet Musa, some say. But he was a multi-billionaire. He was the richest man on earth. And he was so boastful of his wealth to the extent that the ignorant said, we wish we had like Qarun has. And they've neglected the blessings and favors of Allah upon them, of being Muslims, of being healthy. They wanted to reach that level due to their inferiority complex. They look down at themselves. So a lot of the Muslims would imitate, would fall into this trap of westernization because they want to live the American dream. They want to do this, they want to do that, they want to be like that actor or this actress or that sportsman or athlete or a businessman.
Well, if you want to continue, I just want
Yeah, the fourth reason of trying or falling under the trap or the influence of westernization is the media. What you see affects you. And this is also human nature. If you sit in a room and someone is hysterically laughing, you can't hold yourself but to laugh. There are clips that comes of a child, you know, an infant of a year or two, laughing his head off. And all what you can do is just laugh. You don't know what he's laughing at. But when you see someone laughing, you by nature laugh. And if you're someone who's depressed and sad, he depresses you. So the influence of media is extremely dangerous as well.
What I wanted to say is that why is westernization a new issue? I mean, if we look in Islamic history, we didn't find before that Muslims wanted to be like the West. Rather, we find the quite exact opposite, that many countries or societies in Europe wanted to imitate Muslim lands. So why is it that now, this is a contemporary issue, why is that the case?
Because, as I said, it's an inferiority complex. Human nature. Who's strong now? Who's the man? It's the disbeliever. It's the Marine soldier who does wonders. It's portrayed in the media, this FBI agent or CIA agent or the international spy who, mashallah, shoots his pistol with like a gazillion bullets with one magazine. I would love to buy a pistol like this, or a 9mm that can shoot endlessly without running out of bullets. But this is how we feel. And it's very sad when I come to countries of the Gulf, for example, or Egypt or Jordan or whatever, Muslim countries, and you see the WWE wrestlers coming from the US with their tattoos, with their inappropriate dress code, with their moves, with their ethics, with their pop culture, and they invade the country with what they call a performance, or with their art. And you see the youth, the youngsters, doing the same thing, watching them, being influenced by them. I was in the gym the other day, and this teenage boy came to me, 16 years of age, and he said to me, "You look like so-and-so." And he was talking, and then he said, he mentioned the name. And I said, "Yeah, who's this?" He said, "You don't know him? He's a world famous wrestler." I said, "I don't know him." He said, "Yeah, you don't know this?" Subhanallah.
I know what that is.
Then I asked around and I Googled it, and some of the brothers showed me a clip, and Subhanallah, the Muslim youth are influenced by this due to the media, due to their feeling of weakness and vulnerability. They think that these are the most powerful, or this is the most powerful nation, these are the most powerful men, to the extent that even now, being brainwashed like this, if you see a midget wrestler, but he's coming from America, you think that he has the power to beat a battalion on his own turf. What is this? He's a midget. But this is how we feel and think because of our negative influence of westernization.
Okay, so I mean, that's a very good reason for the influence of westernized culture. entering Islam and Muslims and influencing the youth. Now, obviously, I want to get into how we can counter these influences, but before we do that, I want to get into the effects that it has on the youth. So let's just lightly speak about some of the effects that it has on the youth and it has on society in general, and then we'll get into how can we counter this sort of westernization of the Muslim minds, we can say.
Well, if I may, I'd like to point out something.
Sure.
Now, westernization, again, there are extremes and a middle path.
Yes.
One extreme says you have to take the whole 9 yards, live the Western dream with everything in it, even if it goes against Islam. And on the other extreme, we have the anti-westernization, who would even refuse riding a car or using a mobile phone, or they look at electricity as a menace from the West and prohibiting all of these things. And by the way, this is not hypothetically speaking. There are segments of the society in some Muslim countries who are like the Amish. They think all of this civilization stuff is haram and taboo. Islam is not like this. Islam tells you, because so many liberals come to you and secularists from among the claim to be Muslims, say, why are you wearing a watch? Why are you riding a car? This is innovation, this is bid'ah, this is westernization. So, no, 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 no. Don't go down that line. Our role model, alayhi salatu wasalam, used to wear what is known as jubbatun rumiyah. It's from the Byzantines, but it's a form of clothes that the Prophet used to wear. He used to wear ni'al sabtiyah. That is from Yemen, and Yemen was not a Muslim country. So taking what is good is highly recommended, but staying from what affects your religion and goes against the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah, this is a must. Nowadays, if you want to look at it in a contemporary way, I go to Western universities to study. I learn their medicine, their engineering, I learn their knowledge and sciences to benefit Islam and the Muslims. But I do not go to the extreme of taking what is not permissible in Islam, their lifestyle, their ethics, their morals, their religious practice. So I think we need this concept to define exactly what westernization, the do's and the don'ts.
So we can say the negative Western influences in terms of negatives in terms of against our religion or against the core principles of our religion. Now, before we get into how we can counter these negative effects, we're going to go for a short break, so stay tuned.
Through the powerfully vivid, spiritually uplifting, heart-softening, life-changing, soul-transforming descriptions of life after death, we reminded ourselves about the barrier that is placed. So once you leave this world, a barrier is placed behind you, and you are prevented from coming back to this life. Those 2 rak'ahs that you used to pray, you used to take for granted. After you leave this world, there's a barrier. The journey of the soul through the stages of the day of resurrection and the explicit descriptions of hellfire, as well as the beautiful and spiritually uplifting descriptions of paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, we did not create the heavens and the earth without purpose, without aim, without a reason. This is the assumption of those who disbelieve, so beware and woe to those who disbelieve from the hellfire. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us immediately the example of the righteous people on the Day of Judgment. So He says, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no doubt, verily, the awliya of Allah, the friends of Allah, those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no fear on them.
Go ahead, Ya Shu'aib. Recite from ayah number 16 to 26.
Yeah, okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد خلقنا الإنسان ونعلم ما توسوس به نفسه ونحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد.
تلقى المتلقيان عن اليمين وعن الشمال قعيد ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد.
جاءت سكرة الموت بالحق ذلك ما كنت منه تحيد ونفخ في الصور ذلك يوم الوعيد وجاءت كل نفس معها سائق وشهيد لقد كنت في غفلة من هذا فكشفنا عنك غطاءك فبصرك اليوم حديد.
Welcome back to Contemporary Islamic Issues on Huda TV. Now, before we went for that short break, we were speaking about the westernization of Islamic societies. And the Sheikh mentioned that it's not all types of westernization, it's the negative aspects that affect our religion. And we said when we come back from this short break that we will speak about how we can counter this. But before I actually speak about how we can counter this, Sheikh, something very interesting that you mentioned before we went for that break was that the Prophet ﷺ wore a Roman thobe and he wore slippers that were from Yemen. And there's a very common concept, and it's a famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ on imitating the non-believers. So doesn't this fall under this? Doesn't wearing a Roman thobe or slippers from non-Muslims fall under imitating the kuffar, or how do we define this concept in Islam?
Okay, a small correction. It was not a Roman thobe or a Byzantine thobe. It was made in Byzantium. So what's the difference, Sheikh? When I wear a cap or something to cover my head from the sun, that everybody does wear it, there's no problem. But if I wear a hat that only people in Texas wear it, they have a problem. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith you have referred to, which was narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him and with his father, the Prophet said in a long hadith at the end, وَمَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ, that whoever imitates a people, then he is part of them, he's one of them. Now, to understand this hadith, you have to look into what is considered to be part of the other people's culture, that nobody shares it with them, or part of their religion, or part of their social way of living, and by what is shared commonly by people. So if someone says, Sheikh, you're wearing a watch, I said, okay, what's the problem?
Which is a quite nice one as well.
So what is the problem with that? He said, no, this is from the kuffar. So yeah, but Muslims and non-Muslims wear it. You're wearing a suit and a tie, and this is the dress code of the kafir. But it's also shared by hundreds of millions of Muslims. So it's not only specifically for the disbelievers. Now this is something shared by everyone. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he wore that jubbatun rumiyah, that was made in Byzantium, this was not an indication or a sign. Whomever saw him said, he is from Byzantium, he is from the Romans. No, this was worn by everyone. Now, this is different to someone wearing a specific type of clothes that is only worn by kafir or disbelievers, non-Muslims. So if a woman goes into a party wearing a kimono, for example, the tight dress of women in Japan. Japan is not a Muslim country. So following their culture is not permissible in that aspect. And I'm shocked by some of the people who go to Japanese or Chinese restaurants and they eat with these chopsticks. And you see the rice falling on their laps and what are you doing? He said, I'm eating Chinese food with chopsticks. Akhi, the Chinese food is okay for you to eat, it's halal. But the method of doing it, you're imitating the kafir. For what? There's no benefit in it. You know, using a fork or a spoon, this is the right way of doing it. Eating with your bare hands would be even better if you want. But to go to the extreme of mimicking and imitating the disbelievers, this shows that you have an inferiority complex. Which brings me to the fact that the Prophet ﷺ went against the Jews and the Christians in so many things. And if you go through the Sunnah, you will always read the phrase خَالِفُ الْيَهُودَ وَالْمَجُوسَ وَالنَّصَارَى. Go against the way of the Jews, the Christians, and the fire worshippers. Don't do this, don't do that. Even when it comes to the pre-dawn meal in fasting, or breaking your fast after sunset. The Prophet said, ﷺ, the people are still in good terms as long as they hasten to break their fast and delay and postpone their pre-dawn meal, because the people of the book do not do this. Praying in your sandals is a sunnah. The Prophet said, ﷺ, go against the Jews. Pray in your sandals, because the Jews do not pray in their sandals. They pray barefooted. Growing the beards, the Prophet, for men of course. I don't want the sisters to go say, let's do it. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, خالف اليهود والمجوس والنصارى أعفوا اللحى أرخوا اللحى أسبلوا اللحى أكرموا اللحى أطلقوا اللحى. All of these verbs indicating an instruction and an order to let go. And the reason, the main reason, it's a sunnah, but also another reason is to go against them. So in short, we have to have our identity. Westernization comes to remove all of that. And this is probably why when someone calls for sunnah, people try their level best to discredit him. Wherever you go, in Muslim world or in non-Muslim countries, those who call for the sunnah, for preserving the heritage of our Prophet ﷺ, usually they are sought after to ban and to stop. Why? Because this is what maintains the people's heritage and faith. In Sahih Imam Muslim, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, may Allah be pleased with him, came to the Prophet ﷺ with two garments which were dyed in saffron, a yellowish herb that gives the clothes a very bright, shiny yellow color. Now, among the Muslims, this type of clothes was only worn by the disbelievers. So what did the Prophet do, alayhi salam? When he saw him, he said, Abdullah, did your mother order you to do this? And this is sort of reprimanding him in a very harsh fashion, because a man, he's not his mama's boy. He's a grown-up man. So when you ask him this question, this means that a man does not do this. Abdullah acknowledged immediately, and he knew his mistake. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ, should I wash them? because washing them would remove the saffron from it and it would become white again. The Prophet said, no, burn them. Scholars interpreted this hadith by saying that this is the dress code of the kafir, of the disbelievers. And as a form of reprimanding him, washing it would have done the job. But he wanted it to stick in his mind by telling him to burn it so that he would not ever imitate the disbelievers again.
Sheikh Qasim, I want to ask you two questions actually that many of the viewers are probably thinking by now. So after listening to your explanation, two things popped into my mind. The first being that obviously we're supposed to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and at the same time you said that we've been ordered to separate ourselves or distinguish ourselves from the Christians, the Jewish, and the fire worshippers. Now, say for example, all the Jews start growing their beards exactly how the Muslims do it. Now, do we have to differentiate ourselves in this aspect? Because now if we grow our beards in a certain way, if we grow our beards long and trim our mustache, this is what every single Christian is doing now. So how can we differentiate ourselves in this?
That's a very good question. And it's hypothetical. It will never happen. But if it did happen, the Muslims have to maintain the instruction and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ by keep growing it. Yeah. For example, hypothetically, if all the Christians and the Jews decided to pray 5 times a day like we do, but still remain on following their religion, would we stop praying? No, because this is an instruction to pray. And there's a byproduct of it, which is to go against them. So if they were to follow suit and to imitate us, this does not mean that we have to as well go against them and leave our prayers. Islam tells us to do certain things going against the Jews and the Christians, but these things are not related to their acts. It is part of the reason of doing it, but the main part is to worship Allah Azza wa Jal by following such a thing.
Okay, and the second question was that obviously you said that if something is very specific to the non-Muslims, then that is the act we can't do. So if something is shared between Muslims and non-Muslims, such as wearing certain clothes, then those things could be done. It's not considered imitating the non-Muslims. However, if an act is specifically to a group of non-Muslims, then we cannot copy this act. Now, what if this act was originally specific to one group and now it becomes spread amongst Muslims? Does this still become specifically to one group? Is it still imitating the non-Muslims, or is it something that we can do now?
Part of the greatness of Islam is that it evolves as long as there is room for that. Like 500 years ago, wearing a suit was totally prohibited because this was the dress code of the kafir, of the colonizer, if you wish. Now, the first Muslims at that time to wear suits and to imitate the kafirs were cursed by Allah Azza wa Jal and were sinful. While the circle grew and more people became acquainted with such an act or a dress code, the sin has been reduced until it completely vanished when the majority of the Muslims wearing it not because it is from the kafir, but this is what's convenient for them. So if you go to Egypt, if you go to Jordan, everybody's wearing suits. This is what they wear 24/7, not because the Americans or the Western do this, not because they're under the influence of Westernization. Now this is becoming the norm. Likewise, when you come to things dealing with customs and traditions. Yani, for example, a woman wears on her wedding night a white wedding dress. Now, wearing such a dress 200 years ago was not part of Islam or our culture. So those introducing it, and they may have contributed into the westernization process due to this, those who introduced it at the very beginning were cursed because they were imitating the disbelievers. Nowadays, you will not have a single wedding without the bride wearing such a dress. Do we say it's haram? No, it's totally permissible as long as it falls under the Islamic regulations, not being too tight, not being nude, not being this, not being that, and so on.
So what I can extract from your answer there is that it depends on the intention and the reason why it's being done. So like you said, the people that did it in the beginning, their intention was to imitate, whereas now it's just a norm amongst society, so they don't have any intention of imitating a certain group or certain people.
If the intention still is present today, then it's sinful again.
Okay.
But people don't usually do this because no one wears a suit in such countries saying that, wow, I look like President Obama. They wear the suit because this is the norm. But again, the intention itself is not sufficient. It has to coincide with the act. So if someone says, my intention is good, but my act is evil, then you will fall into the punishment. They have to go side by side.
Okay. All right, Sheikh, unfortunately we did not get to cover everything we wanted to, so we're going to continue this conversation over another episode. So
inshallah.
At least for this, I want to thank you for joining us, and inshallah next episode we will get into how we can counter such negative influences. Dear viewers, I hope you guys benefited from tonight's program or today's program, and I hope that you join us for the continuation of this program so we can get into how we can counter such negative effects. And until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
If Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was here today, watching all the brothers and sisters divided on the sunnah he gave, he'd be screaming out to the ummah of this world, saying you're to blame. Return to the guidance of Allah that will set you free.